There was a horrific accident out of the edge of town, 2-lane highway. It was about dusk and it started to rain. And a father and son were coming back from a sporting event. And they came around a curve and they came face to face with a truck passing another truck. Yeah, bam, head-on collision. So first responders came out immediately, but unfortunately the father passed away at the scene. Now the son was rushed to the hospital in pretty bad shape. So the surgeon's prepping for surgery, comes into the emergency room, operating room, looks at the patient and says, "I can't operate, this is my son." How could that be?
Mother.
The surgeon is the boy's mother, yes. All right, so that's an old riddle, probably heard it a long time ago. Do you remember back when you first heard it? Were you able to solve the riddle?
No, because women in medical field, especially a doctor, was not really a huge thought to your average human.
Yeah. Now there's one other solution, possible solution to this riddle, which is that
Dad.
the surgeon would be the other dad. But the riddle was developed originally to be a device to have this conversation about gender roles. And so we're going to use that solution that the surgeon is the boy's mom. And yeah, Boston University did a very interesting study recently where they asked a couple hundred of their psychology students and more than 100 of their just children in the area, age 7 to 17, they asked them the riddle. So what percentage of these young folk do you think solved the riddle?
Pretty small. Probably a lot.
A lot of them.
I would say a
You
lot.
would think, right? Give me a guess.
Like a percentage guess?
Yeah.
10.
I'll probably say 23.
Yeah, well, we want to say, I would want to say at least 50, right? At this point in, so no, 14, so you're close. 14% of the university students and 15% of the children solved this riddle.
Wow.
Yeah. So Kim, you were just saying, partly, I think in part because still today, 87% of our surgeons in the United States are men. You know, so that's a part of the puzzle here. Well, so we just have a hard time getting into the headspace that a surgeon can be a woman. That's what we're looking at. So if this many surgeons are men, what's that about? Where are we coming from there? Do men make better surgeons than women? Hard to know. But I think if we go back in history a little bit and look at the story of Mary Edwards Walker, that can be a little instructive for us. So Mary Edwards Walker graduated with honors from Syracuse Medical College in 1855. Right? So she graduated, she got married, she set up her medical practice, and then in 1861, Civil War broke out. So she said, I want to volunteer. I want to be a surgeon in the Union Army. And they took one look at her and they said, Dr. Walker, we would be happy to have you join our surgical team. Just kidding, they did not say that. They said, well, you can't be a surgeon, but you can be a nurse. So she said, I'll show you. So that's what she did. She worked in surgery as a nurse. She showed them what she could do. And in 1863, she became the first woman surgeon in the U.S. Army. She was very brave. She went across enemy lines. She treated the wounded repeatedly, and sometimes where men surgeons were not willing to do. Then, in 1864, she was just completing an amputation. Why do doctors do amputations? Save lives.
Yeah, can't save the life, not save the
So
life.
she had just helped save someone's life, and she was captured. So she was held as a prisoner of war in the Confederacy for several months until the end of the war. And then after the war, she received the military's highest decoration. And still today, she is the only woman ever to have been awarded the Medal of Honor. So she really lived that Medal of Honor, and she wore it. In 1870, she was arrested in New Orleans for impersonating a man because she was wearing trousers. Let that blow your mind for a minute? Yeah. Well, she went to court dressed in her long jacket and her trousers and her Medal of Honor, and they recognized her, and they let her go. They dropped the charges. She said, I don't wear men's clothes, I wear my clothes. And, you know, Dr. Walker, she had a lot of issues with 1870s women's fashion, all right?
Me too.
Can't imagine why.
Yeah, I wonder why.
Okay, so these corsets and these yards and yards of fabric, she said, I can't move, I can't get around anywhere. So it restricts your movement. It's also unhealthy the way it squeezes your organs and it's dragging mud inside, and not to mention how expensive it is to dress like that. So she never went back to wearing what she considered, you know, just really useless clothing. She was an abolitionist. She was a women's suffragist. She testified to Congress. So clearly, Mary Edwards Walker, she pushed a lot of envelopes, right? And our country benefited because she did. But I just have to wonder, was she really the only woman talented enough to be a surgeon in the Civil War? Let me see your hand if you think there was at least one other woman talented enough to be a surgeon during the Civil War. At least one? How about 10? You think there were at least 10?
Talented enough, sure.
Yeah, talent.
Anyone want to go 50? I mean, really, how many women were talented enough to be a surgeon or any of the myriad other careers that were restricted to men at that time? They just didn't push the envelope like Dr. Walker did. And how did we get to the point where we restricted women's ability to fulfill their potential and share their talents with people who needed them? So we're going to begin exploring that as we look at this.
Patty, I want to circle back around because we're supposed to be talking about great information, but we haven't talked a lot about hostility. And so I know that you do a lot of work with companies and businesses and organizations in regards to how to communicate. Can you give some advice on how to address hostility or those types of experiences from your perspective?
Sure. So I always have to tell a little bit of a story. When I was a teenager, my great aunt told a racist joke. And I wanted to just right now just say, that's racist, what are you talking about? But I didn't want to hurt the relationship. It was, you know, Christmas, we're gathering for dinner, so I didn't say anything. And I don't know if you've ever been there, but that feels terrible. And I never wanted to feel that again. So it kind of became my life mission to figure out what to say so that no one ever says anything in my presence and they don't hear from me. But I also wanted to make sure that I didn't damage the relationship. And so I did a lot of research, working with a nonprofit, we developed this process. So it's ask, clarify, and express. And so I did it that way so that I can remember it. And as I realized, maybe it's something that others can benefit too. So it's about starting with curiosity, asking a curious question. And so, for instance, when I was in a break room and there was something on TV, something about a terrorism event, and there was an African-American expert speaking on this event, and this white colleague next to me said, that, and he said the N-word, doesn't know what he's talking about. And I, just about lost my breath. I mean, I couldn't, but I did know these 3 steps. And so I figured out a way to say, did you just say the N-word? Trying to be curious, trying to portray it as not judgmental. I'm sure it probably was. Came across a little judgmental, I'm a work in progress. But he said, yeah, so. And so I continued to ask him about where is this coming from? How do you get to the place where you think that it's okay to say that? And he went on, and I could tell that he was upset. I said, well, you seem upset about, there's something else going on. What are you really upset about? And he said, well, I don't want to talk about it. So I knew there was something else going on there, but I'm trying to, what we do, we call it opening the window. By being curious, by asking questions, by restating, by checking for feelings, we're opening up the window of communication. Because at the beginning, that window was shut. He wasn't going to hear anything I had to say. But as I'm asking, as I'm saying, okay, so it sounds like you're upset. Sounds like you, and eventually he told me, oh, I used to hang out with these black art students, and we all said that word, and nobody objected. You're just not cool like that. So I said, well, how do you know they really were okay with it? And so I just continued to ask him questions, trying to be curious, and eventually he acknowledged, yeah, I don't know that they weren't okay with it. I just assumed that. And I said,
think of a joyful moment in your life. One particular event or moment where you felt immense joy. Maybe it's a celebration or a new beginning, a connection. So take a few seconds. Think of your joyful moment. Got it? Okay. I'm going to ask you a few questions, and I just want you to answer by raising your hand and answer all that apply. So raise your hand if during this joyful moment you were all by yourself. Wow. Okay. Raise your hand if in this joyful moment you were connecting with nature, art, music, divine. Quite a few. Yeah. Okay, raise your hand if in this joyful moment you were connecting with at least one other person. All right, most of us. And raise your hand if during this joyful moment you were judging. Not just discerning, but really judging. Nobody. Oh. All right, well, your answers support my theory that judgment is incompatible with joy.